So a government race report sanctioned by Boris Johnson after the Black Lives Matter protest last year has determined that the UK is a model for other white major countries. It says that the UK cannot call itself a post-racist society, but that it's made great strides in areas such as minimizing the ethnic pay gap, and that racism has become less important in the UK. The Commission's chairman said, yeah, there's racism in the country, but there were no signs of institutional racism. And that some things that people attribute to racism often don't have their origin in racism. Okay, all right. Maximum effort. Number one, no one knows who this commission team is comprised of. Well, I don't anyway, but it doesn't actually matter. Let me explain why. You guys won't know this, but a lot of corporate companies pay me to speak to their staff about how to tackle the issue of racism and systemic oppression in their businesses. Like, I'll do like Zoom panels with hundreds of their staff, giving them my tips on the matter and how to move forward. And one of the first things that I tell them is to get rid of the notion that you already have a team in place that staff could go to tackle their grievances, but you know, it's not used, because you must understand that having black staff and having comfortable and fearless black staff are two very different things. A lot of us have been taught by our traumatized older generation, due to the systemic oppression that they have undergone, to say nothing at our workplace. Keep your head down. Don't cause a fuss. Don't work twice as hard for half as much, aka suffer hindrances and marginalization in the name of economic survival. I don't personally blame our forefathers. They are traumatized from past terminations without a cause for even kicking up the slightest of fusses. So before you think your black staff would ever air their actual grievances, you have to first, this is what I tell the companies, create an environment that specifically makes it clear to black staff that they cannot and will not be fired or treated differently for speaking their truth. And it needs to be made extremely clear, like you're explaining it to a baby. Because your horror stories were about Casper the Friendly Ghost. The horror stories from our parents and from our own experiences is that they got fired from work, and that's why there's no grist for Christmas. There are so many companies with black staff that have made culturally clueless decisions, and you wonder how the black person in the room didn't raise their hand and like, yo, say, H&M, like maybe we shouldn't put a black child in a monkey hoodie, like maybe we shouldn't do that. And then you wonder how this happens, because how much black people do you really believe have been made comfortable enough to be themselves in their companies? And yes, that's a job for the company, because this country and its systemic oppression and the lack of acknowledgement thereof is what made us uncomfortable in the first place. Why am I saying all of this? Because if black people feel uncomfortable in their businesses, right, in their places of work, of employment, imagine how uncomfortable and afraid to speak a black person would feel in a Boris governed panel. Do you think I think that the government will strive to make a panel that, even if it does have black people on it, will feel safe enough to say their truth without scrutiny? No! So that's number one. Number two of the points of the report conflict in a very scary way. Saying you cannot call it a post-racist country, but then saying it should be a model for other major white countries is just violence. You are essentially saying, don't be racist like that, be racist like this. Like, it is indicative of the pure lack of understanding of what racism is, how it feels. Do you know what it feels like for your existence to be an issue? Knowing that for a black parent, there are two talks you must have with your children. The talk about the birds and the bees, and the talk about being black in these streets. Like, we live with racism even on days we don't experience it, because the fear of racism permeates our every waking decision. You have taught prejudice so well and so long, we even practice it on each other, being victims of this system and its media perpetuations, causing us to see each other how you were taught to see us. Even a smidgen, an egg yolk of racism is violence incarnate. To make one feel like their existence, their presence, before they do anything is a problem, is unfathomable aggression against said individual's psyche. Racism isn't a topic you get to congratulate yourself on only having a little of. Like, this is not the time to pat yourself on the back because you're the best of a bad bunch. Lunatics. Then to deny systemic racism is breathtakingly wild, because, let me help you. In teaching your kids in your schools that racism happened, as in past tense, it leaves them with no cultural context of what we go through all the time. Then it leads them to become bosses and colleagues in our workplaces that call our sufferings coincidences and exaggerations. Systemic racism, marginalizing our history taught in your schools to our struggles, and then editing yours so Winston Churchill is a hero rather than a racist. systemic racism. Then to say that the report found that many things people say is racist actually isn't, many things that people say is racist actually isn't, is essentially to call us stupid. And then you would think, why would they even do a report like this, which is so off the mark, such a misfire? And then you realize this report was never for us. That report is to alleviate the guilt of Britannians, not British people, Britannians. As I've been telling you guys, there's a difference between British people and Britannians. Poor Britannians were confused last year as they were watching black people march in a way they couldn't ignore. It ended up right in their face. And it's now Boris Johnson's job to make sure that his people feel like they have nothing to feel guilty about. See, we look at that report and we see immediate nonsense, but Britannians will wave that report like a flag. All they needed was their "We Are Not Racist" badge, and now they have it thanks to Boris. That Team Boris commission, their mission never had anything to do with making our lives easier and everything to do with making Britannians feel more at ease with having pride in their country. The report is racist. The report is violent. It's another crowning example of the dedication to ignorance that lies within the very fabric of this country.